And meanwhile, the Democratic Secretary of State in California is declining to remove Trump from the ballot. That ruling also coming down last night. And across the country, similar ballot issue cases with Trump are still pending in at least 14 states. Let's get to NewsNation's Joe Khalil now, live for us at the Supreme Court in Washington. Joe, there's a lot of back and forth on this, but this issue will ultimately be decided by the High Court. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems that way. When you've got multiple states that are all coming to different conclusions, that's typically what we assume is going to happen in terms of how you solve this, Natasha. You have Maine that just did this last night, as you mentioned, different from the way this happened in Colorado. In Colorado, it was the state Supreme Court that made a 4-3 decision to keep Donald Trump off their ballot. In Maine, it was just one person, their Secretary of State, Shayna Bellows. Now, this is somebody who is the top elections officer in Maine, so she does have the ability to do this. Nonetheless, it's going to be a pretty complicated and tough case for her and Colorado, for that matter, to make. Now, what they do have in common is their arguments are based on the same theories, which are, in their view, Donald Trump was absolutely at the center of what happened on January 6th. They say January 6th was absolutely an insurrection, and therefore the 14th Amendment bars him from becoming president. And you see right here the Secretary of State talking about how serious this is. She says, I'm mindful no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on the 14th Amendment. I'm also mindful no presidential candidate has engaged in an insurrection. So, again, that is going to be a tough case to make, Natasha, especially given the fact that no court in America has yet to convict Donald Trump for crimes related to January 6th. The Department of Justice, they are pursuing those charges, but nobody has convicted him of it yet. So, again, that brings up a pretty serious challenge for their case here.
Yeah, a challenge and a lot to track. And, Joe, we are expecting a ruling, meanwhile, from Oregon at any moment now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We mentioned how many states are going through this now. Oregon, just the latest one, where once these states have their filing deadlines, that becomes the time when we expect that some of these decisions come down. So you've got Oregon, but take a look here at the map, because you've got about a dozen or so states that are all dealing with very similar lawsuits here. We talked about California making their own decision about they're going to keep Trump on the ballot. You talked about Michigan. Their courts have already decided they're going to keep Trump on the ballot. And then you've got Colorado and Maine that we've been talking about who've decided another way. And look at all of these other sort of yellow and orange states that are going to, we assume, take this up at some point. So it brings us back to where we started, Natasha. When you've got the same set of facts in front of multiple states and they're coming up with different conclusions, that's typically an indication that whatever happens is really going to end up in the Supreme Court in the hands of the 9 justices for them to figure out and sort of be the guideline for the rest of the states to follow once they end up taking this up.
A big issue in this new year coming up. Joe Khalil live at the Supreme Court tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.